Dark Souls originally came out in 2011, and since then it's helped to redefine the action RPG. I unfortunately missed it the first time round. With Elden Ring coming out soon, now seemed like the perfect time to revisit Miyazaki's first masterpiece. We start out much like any other Souls game, pick your class, pick your optional power-ups and off you go. More often than not, I select the warrior in situations like this, so even though I understand magic is pretty useful in this game, and pretty OP, however, I just can't get away from wielding that sword. In the world of Dark Souls, this land has fallen into disrepair, years after a bunch of gods teamed up to take on a gang of ancient and deadly dragons. Now, the world is slowly decaying over time, leaving behind it wicked beasts and zombie-like corpses. And the player somehow manages to stay alive through this, and it's our job to battle through a series of punishing bosses to the end. And normally, it's our end, but rinse and repeat the process and you'll learn enough along the way and slowly chip away and make progress in the game. Ultimately, this is what Dark Souls is all about. You're seriously ill-equipped at the start of a journey, and you'll venture out, learn attack patterns, level up various skills, and take down the seemingly impossible in front of you. At first, it's going to be tough, and it may seem unlikely, but be persistent and the rewards will come. So Dark Souls Remastered manages to clean up much of the PlayStation 3 features, including textures, online play, and performance. The core gameplay of Dark Souls has been preserved, whilst improving many other things along the way. So the core game may be over 10 years old now, and the remaster roughly 4 years old. However, this is a game that stands the test of time, and this remaster is one of the best ways to experience this, and perhaps the only other major competition is Demon's Souls on the PS5. Well, the core gameplay to Dark Souls is fighting and combat, although there's a certain amount of puzzle solving and exploration too. Well, the game is going to throw challenge after challenge at you at a relentless pace, and at first you're going to feel ill-equipped, but learn the patterns of the bosses and execute your tactics to perfection to progress. So sometimes you're going to have a good run where everything will flow and is going to work, and sometimes you're going to die to a poison rat after only 30 seconds. You know, Dark Souls is all about making little steps forward and remembering your path, learning how to parry your opponent's attacks and taking down that boss after 4 or 5 tries. So it's a game about persistence and reveling in your victories. The world around you does a lot of work, so we've got huge castles, dragons, dark nights, swamps and crypts, all interconnected and at first seemingly impenetrable and all very, very difficult. This eases over time, and areas that were once impossible to get through now become a breeze. You know, Dark Souls always feels dangerous. This is obvious in combat, but also when you're not in combat too. You know, weapons that you're trying to collect, they're out of reach. Quest lines end abruptly in death, and Dark Souls is also a mystery to new players. Its secrets and lore, they're tucked away in item descriptions, and the game is almost trying to be really difficult in terms of explaining itself. You know, it doesn't, but in a way, having to seek out the deeper meaning and explanation of Dark Souls is very, very impressive. You know, one of the major drawbacks of Dark Souls is the structure. So the first half of the game is all about exploration and discovery. And once you get to the second half of the game, that's flipped on its head, and you've got 4 distinct locations with enemies now leveled up to an infuriating level. So levels are filled with lava, bottomless pits, and it's full of dirty tricks that are going to drain you of your energy and motivation pretty quickly. Well, Dark Souls Remastered keeps much of the original, you know, both the highs and the lows. They've managed to remove some of the original glitches that allow for infinite souls, but otherwise it's very true to its original form. So if you've got the original Dark Souls, then this may be a little bit disappointing, with the game feeling much more like it's suited for new players to the franchise rather than veterans. You know, the visuals have been given a much needed overhaul, with the textures and fidelity much improved, and some argue that the original graphics and frame rate are part of the Dark Souls experience, but I for one welcome these upgrades. However, I didn't experience the game in its vanilla form. Well, Dark Souls Remastered has been a pleasure to play, albeit sometimes leading me to bash my head against a wall on some occasions. Now, this is a close replica of the original and allows us, new players, to understand what the hype was all about. If you're a fan of the most recent Souls games, I'd recommend going back and checking it out. You know, the Dark Souls Remaster arrived in 2018, when the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One were in full swing. You know, this is the best way to experience Dark Souls, and if you haven't, I thoroughly recommend it. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. Or you can follow me on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you soon.